I told you, it wasn't my fault. The coffee spilled when I slammed the brakes.
And the trauma bag just happened to fall out too.
By the time Officer Trent Mercer shoved Dr. Isaiah Bennett face first onto the hood of the black Range Rover, the hospital parking lot had gone silent in that strange way places do when everyone realizes something ordinary has just turned dangerous. The coffee Isaiah had bought 10 minutes earlier burst across the windshield. The cardboard tray folded under his wrist. His keys clattered under the car. And the insulated medical case he'd been carrying hit the pavement hard enough to split open, sending sealed insulin pens, syringes, and patient charts skidding across the oil-streaked concrete. "Don't move," Mercer snapped, one forearm pressed between Isaiah's shoulder blades, the other hand yanking at his collar. "You're already in enough trouble." Just before that, it had been a normal morning. Isaiah had come off an 18-hour trauma shift at St. Catherine Memorial, exhausted, still wearing navy scrubs under a wool coat, his eyes burning from fluorescent lights and too much bad coffee. He was supposed to drive straight from the hospital to a church clinic across town, where he volunteered every Saturday before finally going home. The case in his hand held supplies for diabetic patients who couldn't afford to miss another week. It was the kind of routine that only looked unremarkable from the outside. Inside, it was stitched together by discipline, fatigue, and the quiet habit of showing up for people. He had just unlocked his car when Mercer's cruiser cut across two empty spaces and stopped inches from his front bumper. No greeting, no question, no courtesy. "Step away from the vehicle," Mercer barked as he got out. Isaiah turned, confused more than alarmed. "Officer, this is my car." Mercer's eyes moved from the Range Rover to Isaiah's face to the medical case on the ground, and whatever story he had already decided on settled deeper. "We got a report of stolen hospital property and a suspicious vehicle. Hands where I can see them." Isaiah lifted his hand slowly. "You can check the registration. My wallet's in my coat pocket. I'm a physician here." Mercer gave a thin smile that wasn't a smile at all. "You people always have a story." Then he grabbed him. The force of it shocked the air out of Isaiah's lungs. Mercer twisted his arm high behind his back and drove him into the hood so hard the metal buckled with a sharp pop. Isaiah gasped, more stunned than afraid for the first second. Then instinct took over. "You're hurting me," he said through clenched teeth. "My ID is in my coat. I work in this hospital." Mercer patted him down like he was stripping parts off a machine, then ripped the hospital badge from the lanyard around Isaiah's neck and let it drop into a puddle. "Save it for processing." A nurse pushing through the employee exit froze halfway down the ramp. A valet stopped rolling a wheelchair. A man waiting beside the outpatient doors pulled out his phone. Isaiah tried once more, calm but strained. "Look at the badge. My name is on it." Mercer didn't look. He kicked the medical case with the toe of his boot, and one of the sealed boxes spun into the open. "Narcotics theft too?" "They're clinic supplies," Isaiah said. "They're logged out under my name." Mercer leaned lower, close enough for Isaiah to smell mint gum and cold rage. "You think a fancy car and some scrubs make you untouchable?" Then he said it loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Black male attempting to leave with stolen medical property. Resisting commands." It was a lie so immediate and so confident that it changed the shape of the moment. Heads turned. More phones came out. Two additional officers arrived from the street, drawn by the radio call, and Mercer fed them the story before Isaiah could get a full sentence out. One officer started gathering the supplies from the ground. The other reached for Isaiah's wrists. "I am not resisting," Isaiah said louder now. "I am Dr. Isaiah Bennett. Check my employee ID. Check the vehicle. Registration. Call hospital administration." Mercer answered by slamming him to his knees. The crack of bone against pavement made the nurse on the ramp flinch. Isaiah's palm scraped raw as he caught himself. The metal edge of the handcuff bit so deep into one wrist that blood ran down to his thumb. Mercer kept talking for the crowd now, every sentence polished with authority. He matched the description. He failed to comply. He became combative. It was the kind of performance built on one assumption. If he said it first, people would believe it. But the people watching weren't seeing what Mercer thought they were seeing. They were seeing a tired man in hospital scrubs pinned to the ground beside scattered medication. They were hearing him identify himself over and over in a steady, controlled voice while the officer escalated like he needed the scene to justify itself. A woman in pink scrubs started recording from 10 feet away. "That's Dr. Bennett," she said, her voice trembling with disbelief. He runs trauma. Mercer wheeled toward her. Back up before you interfere. She didn't. Neither did anyone else. By then the parking lot had changed. What began as one officer controlling one man was turning into a ring of witnesses, cameras raised, faces tightening, whispers crossing in fast, nervous currents. Isaiah looked up from the pavement, jaw clenched against the pain. He didn't beg. He didn't shout. He just fixed his eyes on Mercer and said, "You need to stop right now." Mercer heard the sentence the wrong way. He heard defiance where there was warning. Instead of easing off, he crossed the line that would destroy him. He ordered one of the other officers to search the car without consent. He seized Isaiah's phone when Isaiah asked to call the hospital administrator. Then, with cameras rolling, he planted a knee between Isaiah's shoulder blades and reached for the secondary lock on the handcuffs, tightening them until Isaiah's breath broke into a hiss. "Search everything," Mercer said. "He's dirty." The valet backed away and dialed hospital security. A family waiting outside the emergency entrance began live streaming. Through the glass doors, employees were already gathering, pressed shoulder to shoulder, watching in disbelief. And then the wrong person saw the wrong scene. Dr. Lena Whitaker, the hospital's chief executive, stepped out of the revolving door flanked by the head of security and 2 board members. They had been on their way to a closed morning meeting with city officials. She took one look at the man on the pavement and stopped so abruptly the people behind her nearly walked into her. "What are you doing to Dr. Bennett?" she said. Mercer's hand froze on the cuffs. For the first time, the certainty left his face. Lena didn't slow down. "Get off him. Now." There was a tiny pause, just a second, but in that second the entire power dynamic tore open. Mercer looked from Lena to the crowd to the blood on Isaiah's wrist and realized too late that the man he'd called a thief wasn't just a doctor. He was St. Catherine's director of trauma medicine. He was the physician who had testified in state hearings on emergency care disparities. He was the doctor scheduled in less than an hour to present a confidential injury audit to the Attorney General's office and a federal civil rights monitor, an audit documenting a spike in unexplained fractures, delayed treatment, and altered arrest narratives coming out of Mercer's own precinct. Mercer hadn't stopped the suspect. He had put his hands on the one man who had been quietly building the paper trail that could bury his department. Isaiah was helped to his feet, his breathing shallow, his right hand trembling as he flexed it. His eyes stayed on Mercer. No anger in them now. Something colder. Something final. Lena held up the soaked hospital badge Mercer had dropped in the puddle. "You assaulted a senior physician on hospital property in front of staff, patients, and cameras." Mercer tried to recover. "Ma'am," he matched the description of "don't," Lena said. Not one more lie. Then the police lieutenant assigned to hospital district detail arrived, pushing through the crowd with an expression that changed the moment he recognized Isaiah. Security had already preserved the surveillance footage. Staff were already naming witnesses. Phones were still recording. The lieutenant didn't ask for a long explanation. He only looked at Mercer, looked at the crowd, then said the sentence every abusive officer believes won't ever be said to him. "Turn over your badge." Mercer stared at him. "Now." The metal hit the lieutenant's hand in front of everyone. That would have been humiliation enough for most men. For Mercer, it was only the first crack. By noon, the live stream had spread across the city. The video from the patient's family showed the beginning of the encounter before Mercer ever touched Isaiah. It captured Isaiah standing beside his car with his hands visible. It captured Mercer ignoring the hospital badge, kicking the medical case, and announcing theft before any investigation had taken place. The nurse's recording picked up the words Mercer muttered when he thought only Isaiah could hear them. The valet's statement placed the officer's cruiser behind Isaiah's vehicle before any dispatch confirmation of a stolen car call. Hospital security footage showed something worse. Mercer had not responded to a report. He had been sitting in the parking lot for nearly 12 minutes watching Isaiah from a distance before moving in. By evening, Internal Affairs had the dispatch logs. There had been no stolen vehicle report. No call about missing narcotics. No bolo. Nothing. Mercer had manufactured the entire basis for the stop after the fact. That single discovery opened the floor beneath him, and once it opened, everything buried under it started coming up. His body camera, conveniently inactive during the first 11 minutes of the encounter, didn't save him. Digital forensics showed it had been manually disabled 34 seconds before he approached Isaiah. The arrest report he filed 2 hours later claimed furtive movement, failure to identify, and attempted flight. Every one of those claims was contradicted by 3 separate videos and 13 witnesses. Then a local reporter did what the department had failed to do for years. She asked who else Mercer had stopped. Within 48 hours, 3 prior complaints resurfaced. A college student whose shoulder was dislocated during a traffic stop. A church deacon accused of shoplifting while carrying donation receipts. A black delivery driver held face down in front of his own apartment building because Mercer claimed the address didn't fit the vehicle. None of those complaints had led to discipline. All of them had ended the same way. Mercer wrote the first report, and the system chose to believe. The badge over the bruises. This time, the bruises belonged to a man the city knew by name. Isaiah spent that night in the same hospital where he worked, not as a surgeon, but as a patient. Wrist ligament damage. 2 cracked ribs. Deep tissue swelling across the shoulder. By the next morning, photographs of his injuries sat beside screenshots of Mercer's report on every major local station. Then the hidden truth became the institutional crisis. The audit Isaiah had been preparing was released under subpoena. It contained 27 cases from the previous 14 months in which detainees from Mercer's precinct arrived at St. Catherine with injuries inconsistent with officer narratives. Broken orbital bones described as minor resistance. Wrist fractures labeled self-inflicted during restraint. One teenager with a ruptured spleen after an arrest report claimed minimal force. Isaiah had been careful, methodical, quiet. He had documented everything. Dates, scans, physician notes, discharge summaries, inconsistencies. The report had not named Mercer publicly yet, but once Internal Affairs cross-referenced shift schedules and transport logs, his name appeared again and again like a stain spreading through paper. The mayor called for an emergency briefing. The district attorney announced a criminal review. The state attorney general opened a pattern and practice investigation. The Department of Justice requested hospital records tied to use of force injuries from Mercer's precinct. What began with one man shoved onto a hood had become a public audit of an entire department's habits. Mercer was fired 6 days later. Not suspended. Not reassigned. Fired. 2 weeks after that, he was charged with felony assault under color of law, false imprisonment, evidence tampering, and filing a false police report. The prosecutor stood in front of cameras and said the words no one in Mercer's position ever expects to hear aimed back at them. The badge did not authorize the violence. It concealed it. The civil suit hit next. St. Catherine Memorial joined Isaiah's personal action after attorneys established that Mercer's fabricated theft claim had disrupted medical operations, endangered patient supplies, and interfered with a physician performing official hospital duties. Discovery dragged more names into daylight. Supervisors who had buried prior complaints. A sergeant who coached report language. A captain who signed off on no policy violation findings without reviewing witness video. The city settled with several prior victims before trial, but Isaiah refused a quiet deal. He wanted testimony. He got it. In a packed federal courtroom, frame by frame. The footage played on a screen too large for anyone to pretend not to see. Mercer's face hardened as each lie collapsed. The invented report. The disabled camera. The illegal search. The slur caught on the nurse's phone. The moment he tightened the cuffs after Isaiah identified himself. The moment he heard Dr. Bennett and understood exactly how badly he had miscalculated. The jury took less than 3 hours. The judgment was devastating. Isaiah won a multi-million-dollar verdict. Mercer lost his appeal for reinstatement, lost his certification, and lost the pension protections he assumed would outlive his conduct. But the deepest consequence landed beyond him. The federal investigation found a pattern of racial targeting, report manipulation, and force escalation in Mercer's unit. The city entered a consent decree. Officers were placed under external monitoring. Body camera policies were rewritten so deactivation triggered automatic command notification. All use of force arrests now required synchronized review against hospital intake records. Anonymous complaint intake was moved outside the department. 2 supervisors resigned before they could be terminated. 1 deputy chief was indicted for records obstruction. The old system did what abusive systems always do when finally cornered. It claimed surprise. It called the damage isolated. It said reforms were already underway. The videos said otherwise. The record said otherwise. Isaiah said otherwise. Months later, he stood at the same hospital entrance where Mercer had driven him to his knees. The hood of the Range Rover had been repaired. The bruises had faded. His wrists still ached in the cold, but his voice did not shake when reporters asked whether he felt vindicated. "This was never about one bad morning," he said. "It was about what some men think a badge lets them do when they believe nobody important is watching. The truth is, they've been doing it to people they thought nobody would listen to. I was just the one they picked on the wrong day." That line traveled further than the original video. Because it was true. Mercer thought he was confronting a man alone in a parking lot. What he was really confronting was the end of a lie his uniform had protected for years. He saw a black man with an expensive car and a case full of medicine and decided the story before he knew the facts. He thought authority could create truth if it spoke loud enough. He thought a report could erase a witness, and a badge could outrank reality. Instead, the witnesses multiplied. The cameras held. The records opened. And the man he tried to humiliate became the reason the entire machine was forced into the light. Mercer never wore a badge again. His name stayed in charging documents, civil findings, and training reforms long after the news vans left. Isaiah kept working, kept testifying, kept pushing for review systems that protected the people whose names never trend and whose injuries usually disappear into paperwork. Justice did not arrive as mercy. It arrived as evidence, exposure, and consequences that could not be walked back. That is what made it real. If you believe abuse of power should always end in accountability, comment justice and subscribe.